Hi, my name is Stacy Barden, and I'm going to talk about the story theory and how it applies to nursing practice. Story theory was created by Mary Jane Smith and Patricia Lear. Hi, my name is Stacy Barden, and I'm going to be talking about story theory, which was developed by Smith and Lear, and how we can apply it to nursing practice. Stories are a basic part of our lives that help us communicate with others, and nurses are constantly seeking ways to improve communication. The story theory is one way that we can begin a therapeutic relationship with the patient and progress through phases to help the patient identify with the problem and then work through the problem. One very important aspect of this is active listening. The following is a concept map which utilizes Smith and Lear's story theory specifically as it focuses on the nurse's role in caring for a hospitalized diabetic patient with DKA. Once the formal introduction has been accomplished, the nurse should be present in the moment and be an active listener. It's during this discussion that the patient and the nurse are able to identify the internal dilemma. It's really what matters most to the patient. And it may not be specifically regarding diabetes or DKA. So it's important to really have the patient be the one who is identifying what is really important. But the nurse can help through certain interventions, help the patient through this process. The discussion around specific backgrounds or situations that may have led to this point may be discussed, and the nurse can help clarify that information and the gravity of the situation. They may possibly discuss possible non-adherence as it relates to DKA or diabetes. The nurse also might work with the patient to recognize knowledge that they already have, the foundation for building on that. You can focus on things that they may already know, such as glucose monitoring, and then move forward to things that they don't know and reinforce any assumptions that are being made. Through continued exploration of the dilemma, the patient and the nurse are able to look at past experiences and how they reflect on the current situation. According to Smith and Lear, as the story begins to take shape, it may reveal experiences, positive or negative, that impact the patient's present dilemma. And it may create an uneasiness, but it is necessary to help strengthen the relationship. Oftentimes, through exposure of past experiences, there become patterns of behavior that come to the surface. And with that, there are feelings. So the nurse can help reflect with the patient of those feelings and those past behaviors. Maybe they've been hospitalized for DKA in the past, or maybe they've had family members who've had it and they're reflecting on their experiences. So it's really important for the nurse to refocus and help the patient work through that, and even identifying any challenges that they have on a daily basis. Through continued engagement and nurturing the therapeutic relationship, the patient begins to move into the second phase of the story theory. And that's where the patient begins to make connections in relation to self in relation to others. And the process is reflective narration, where the patient can now start the process of understanding the depth and the meaning that's really hidden in the story. It's an opportunity for the nurse to assist the patient with facing the highs and the lows of the narration and be able to start to move forward. The nurse helps the patient begin the process of reconciliation with bad behaviors. They may have the feeling of being ashamed or afraid to speak about diet indiscretions, or they may have guilt because they don't want to be judged by others. So it's really important for the nurse to look at and validate those feelings as a normal human response and be able to look forward instead of looking back. The patient may also start to begin to question the rights and the wrongs of their behavior. Why did they have DK? How can they prevent it? And the nurse can then start to begin the education process and helping filling in the gaps where they may not know how to self-manage properly. The narration continues, the patient is able to start looking at specific behaviors that have impacted their self-management. And these may be modeling behaviors, could be related to cultural influences such as specific diets. Some cultures have diets high in carbohydrates or high in salt. And so it's working with the patients to identify some of those cultural barriers, but also work with the patients, not to minimize them. During the discussion, the nurse has a responsibility to also redirect the patient away from negative behaviors and really highlight positive behaviors that the patient should be modeling to help them promote optimal diabetes health. And lastly, the patient can begin the process of self-awareness, identifying themselves as independent of their disease, not being just known as a diabetic. The nurse can help summarize what the patient has said and have the awareness of positive and negative influences that can impact their daily lives of having diabetes, such as social, psychological, economical, spiritual, or even physical. So if the patient doesn't have proper support financially or socially, the nurse can help that patient finding ways to adhere to the self-management process. Once the internal dilemma is revealed and the patient is able to reflect on its importance and how different components during the discussion are identified during the reflective narrative, they can contribute to the current situation, and then the nurse can collaborate with the patient to begin to find contentment or a positive outlook towards the future. And this gives meaning to the patient, meaningful connections of how to apply the patterns of behavior. Nurse helps to empower the patient to be autonomous and confident and begin healing and manage independently. And these moments within the narrative pathways could be large or they could be small, but it's really key to promoting autonomy and confidence. It's important also not to pass judgment or assume anything, and really allow the patient to be able to be the creator of their own story plot and help them work towards resolution with the nurse's guidance. And the aspect of relating and understanding to these challenges of the dilemmas that are gathered from the reflective narrative help to instill hope for the future, and they can start to model positive behaviors and be engaged, and they can let go of past behaviors and work towards the future and have hopes and dreams and aspirations of a positive future living with diabetes. Diabetes is a life-altering diagnosis, but it doesn't have to be the only thing that they know. They have the ability to work with the nurse to have a positive future. Here we see some of the key assumptions of the story theory by Smith and Lear. The individual is constantly evolving through interconnected paradigms. The lived experience is created by past and possibly future events that shape their response to the present. The individual becomes aware of their purpose and potential through the context of narration. The three core concepts of the story theory are the intentional dialogue, connecting with self in relation to others, and finally creating ease. Smith and Lear did not specifically outline the nursing paradigm, but here we have some key aspects of each one. The nursing helps guide the patient as the story unfolds and moves along a continuum from recognition of a health challenge all the way to resolution. Health, as it relates to the patient, is the patient's perceived health challenge, which they may not identify themselves. Environment could be related to internal and external factors that affect their human experience. And finally, the person is the bearer of the human experience and will identify with who they are, where they have been, and where they are going through the story theory and the narration with the nurse.